Hey everyone, Kyron here from No BS Crypto, bringing you a brand new interview. Now, today I have the absolute pleasure of talking with Greg Lunt, a Quant Network researcher, and might I say a really good one at that, who dives into the fundamental details of Quant. And if anyone knows Quant Network, that rabbit hole pretty much never ends. He's also a master Twitter threader with 14,000 followers, pretty much based off the fact that he's a really good quant researcher. Now, in this video, we're going to be looking at the fundamental details of quant and pretty much all the aspects I didn't have enough time to go into in my first video, which, by the way, you should take a look at because I dive into the technicals in a nice and easy to follow format. Plus, I do look at some fundamentals we obviously won't cover in this video. And in saying that, I want to thank everyone for their questions as well, because we did touch on a lot of those in this video. So without further ado, let's go. All right, everyone, welcome to the video. So we've got Greg here. Greg, thank you so much for coming on the channel. I really appreciate it. So we're just going to start off pretty much going through a few of the questions and a few fundamentals that I didn't really have time to go into on that first video, and Greg's going to be here to help me out with that one. So again, I really appreciate you coming on here, Greg.
Of course, buddy. Thanks for having me. It's really good to connect, and I'm ready to do this.
Awesome. So I guess we'll kick things off. If you possibly could you patch a bit of the history about yourself, possibly, who you are, how you got to where you are, and what got you into crypto in general?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Greg. I'm originally from New York. I currently live in Phoenix, Arizona. I have a professional background in marketing and online sales, and I've just been in the crypto game now since 2017. So it's actually a little over 5 years, which is kind of nuts to think about. I've been through two bull runs. This is my second bear market, and I just stumbled upon it through a buddy of mine who was looking at Bitcoin in my apartment one day, and I was kind of like, "What's that? No, what's that chart?" And he's like, "Oh, it's Bitcoin." I was like, "Oh, I kind of heard about that thing." It had already made its way up to about 3,000 by the time that I'd found out what it was. But within a couple of days, I was investing pretty heavily. I was in a point in my life where I was just trying to figure things out. I had a lot of flexibility. I didn't have a full-time job. I had a little bit extra cash, and I was like, "This is a good opportunity to kind of make some money." So I thought I was a genius, those 3, 4 months going from like September to December of 2017, and then went through the bear market 2018, 2019, and then 2020 we came back around again. So a lot of ups and downs in between, but I learned how to kind of navigate the space through conviction and through research, and adding more when we're down, frankly, worked out really well. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to jump ahead too far, but the 2021 bull run was great, and here we are trying to make our way through this bear market.
Step by step, everything's a bit of a process in crypto, and it's funny that you mention, when you first get into it, those first few months, you think you know everything, and I think a lot of people, especially myself, resonate with that, and my portfolio definitely reflects that. So, um, I wanted to ask you, Greg, how did you? So I know you're currently in crypto full time. You're working full time. Could you just very briefly kind of explain or shed some light on how you kind of went into that?
Yeah, so it's kind of I'd say it's part skill and part luck that I was unemployed, and I was just really passionate about this space, right? And so I guess really the way where it started was I started talking a lot about quant on Clubhouse, which is a voice only chat room app. I don't know if you guys have ever been on Twitter Spaces. That's basically, they stole Clubhouse and made it a feature of Twitter. So Clubhouse was a standalone app that had these like kind of, you know, audio only presentation rooms that people could come up on stage and stuff like that. And I was in a lot of these crypto groups, a couple of them pretty, every day, going in there and contributing and making friendships and offering value. And at the same time, I was, bringing a lot of friends and family into quant and researching it very heavily. I was already kind of deep into it. And I was like, I've been kind of talking about quant and telling people about it on stage and making little pitches here and there. But I was like, I need to do a formal presentation. And so I put together about a 90-minute presentation. It took me like 2 or 3 weeks to put together. And it went over incredibly. So I started doing that every month, just with updates on the project. And it became pretty significant thing in the crypto community on Clubhouse. And then I got invited to do a Twitter Spaces in January of 2022. And I was like, you know what, I got to clean up my Twitter. I had some old, BS on there from years past, nothing crypto related, just a bunch of whining and sports, commentary and stupid stuff. And yeah, just got a few followers off of that space. And I was like, you know what, I should probably start taking Twitter a little more seriously. So I actually started chopping up some of the stuff I had talked about on that spaces and making it into like little videos. And I just started pushing content like fast and hard. And pause. And people on Telegram, started liking it as well. I was sharing it there. And my Twitter just started to go. And I started in like February. I had like 300 followers. And then after about 3 or 4 months of posting every day and becoming, a little bit popular in the community, I decided to start a Patreon. And the day that I launched my Patreon, I got a message in my inbox from someone who had been following me for a while, who was working at a large crypto exchange, and they were like, "Are you looking for a job?" And I was like, "If it's the right job," because I've been holding out pretty much for something that, I'm 30, turning 36 in a week, and I'm not, I've done all the dead end job stuff, and I want to do something that I'm actually passionate about. So, it ended up being the perfect fit, and I got the job. So, um, you know, it was just kind of a stroke of luck that he hit me up, but it was also because I'd been putting out consistent, high quality content that attracted him. So it was kind of, half and half.
I've kind of a similar story to that as well. I've got no prior qualifications, but because I was posting consistent or somewhat consistent quality content, such as yourself, that's kind of how I was almost picked up as well. And that was my follow up question, was kind of like, what piece of advice could you give someone wanting to do crypto full time, for example, that might not have a degree or some sort of formal qualification? You've kind of answered that question, haven't you? Just pretty much posting consistent quality content. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really finding a niche within crypto that you think you can bring value, right? Because, anyone can post like about Bitcoin. I mean, I think if you're really into Bitcoin, you probably have to be writing like long form, like heavy philosophical kind of pieces and stuff like that. And if you think are a good writer and have a good voice, do that. I knew, I had found that the quant content was okay, but I knew that I could bring a different element with my, media editing chops and my writing skills, and just the way that I had a bit of a marketing background. I knew there was a space for me. And there's just also so much research in this project that, it's always good to have more researchers, especially in this one. So, yeah, I would say that if you want to work in crypto, figure out what your skill set is. First of all, like I knew that I could create media rich content. So I went and doubled down on that. Um, you know, Regardless though, it is kind of like, now that I'm thinking about it out loud, like it is a content game. Any business you want to get into, you need to create content for it. So somewhere along that line, maybe it's designing websites, maybe it's, speaking, maybe it's writing, maybe it's podcasting, but you have to figure out, maybe you do like really cool infographics and you do that every day. Maybe you go through old YouTube videos of projects you like and you chop them up and you create narratives. um, I think Twitter threads has been a huge hack for me. Just being able to do some of the long form stuff and expand on my ideas and my research. So figure out ways to put out content consistently and you'll get noticed if you're good. I mean, that's really all it is. And the thing about crypto is, you there aren't people that have 15 years of crypto experience. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So you're not going up against people that just have, it's a fair game. It's a merit based game right now in terms of getting people in. And I'll be honest, just start applying to all these exchanges and all these different companies. Just send out a ton of resumes, because there are a lot of people at the company I work at that don't even understand crypto. You know what I'm saying? Like, and they're not, and it's fine. Like, so if you do understand crypto, that actually gives you a leg up. So just start applying everywhere all the time. And if you can start something on the side, that shows that you have skills, that's really going to go a long way.
It's fantastic advice, man. I appreciate that. And I think everyone else will as well. Now, one of the questions I've probably received the most from the community is definitely what other projects are you looking at besides Quant? Is there any other projects you're looking at, or what else have you invested in, if you're able to disclose that?
Yeah, so I mean, when I first started out, it was kind of a shotgun approach. I invested in probably, I mean, over the years, I've probably been in and out of, 50, 60 projects. At any given time, I might have been holding 20 different tokens. I've actually, over the last year, gotten my portfolio down to literally just Quant and Bitcoin. Those are the two that I have like the utmost conviction in. I think Bitcoin is the decentralized kind of alternative financial system solution, and then Quant is piggybacking on all of the centralization and all of the fiat and all of the like existing systems that are going to need to interlink. They have a CEO; they're very much a company, so they're kind of polar opposites in that way. And so, but I both think that they are fundamentally the most sound in the space without question. And so for me, like I said, I have my job, so I have cash flow, and then I have my investments that I have huge conviction in that I can just slowly put into. I'm because I found Quant, and I think that's the one, at least in my opinion. I have no need anymore to do the like, well, if I just pick 20 different coins and two of them blow up, then I'll be rich. Um, I don't need to take that approach anymore because I think that I can consolidate into the two that I have intense conviction in. So,
Yeah.
yeah, unfortunately, I know a lot of people are looking for those gems, and there's a lot of great people out there. Tokenizer talks about a lot of great utility projects. Nagato, Citizen of the Future. There's all of these guys that talk about great projects. Unfortunately, and of course you, Kyron. So, yeah, unfortunately, I'm not one of them. I'm pretty boring.
No, I think people will recognize that because it's important, I think, to in my opinion, I think finding a select few projects that you're most comfortable with, that you like the most, that you're able to do what you do, dive extremely deep into them, and like we're going to get to in a second, try to find the holes in the ship and almost validate that purchase. And I think when you spread yourself too thin, sometimes a lot of people do this, and I initially did, as you probably did as well. I think you can't keep track of all the projects, and something gets released that might be FUD or might be true FUD, for example, and you can't really initiate on that particular narrative. So I think definitely in your case, sticking it, keeping it basic, keeping the projects that you believe in the most at the forefront is probably the most important thing as well. So it's a good answer. But the next question, I want to get more into Quant itself now. Um, if you were to describe Quant to someone who knows nothing about it, like I was a month ago, in just a couple sentences or a few sentences, how would you kind of describe it in layman's terms?
Yeah, I would say that there are a lot of different databases across the world. Blockchain is a new type of database, and all of these databases need to be able to move digital assets. Right now, the internet can only move data, the pictures, videos, text, but there needs to be a protocol and a system that actually moves value and digital assets from network to network. It's called interoperability, right? It's the ability for two networks to interoperate, to speak the same language, and to share this value driven data. So that's what Quant does through the use of APIs, which are very common in terms of sharing data right now. Like say you want to put a Twitter widget on your website, you can go to Twitter and you can get their API. It stands for Application Programming Interface. And you can plug it right in so that you can get like your Twitter feed to pop up and it's sharing the data directly to you. But there's none of that for moving actual assets, right? And so that's what Quant has created behind their CEO, who's a well-established banking and government official who comes from multiple decades of cybersecurity experience, and he's been able to build something very unique and gotten a ton of adoption that is setting them up for very interesting network effects in the years to come.
And we're going to clarify, not a blockchain.
Not a blockchain. It's more of an operating system. Is how they used to brand themselves.
Yeah.
It's still that. They kind of went away from that terminology. They call themselves an API gateway now, a little more technical, but
Yep.
it is essentially an operating system for blockchains. The same way you could have programs on Windows, you can have blockchains on Overledger, which is Quant's product.
Yeah. Excellent. And in your opinion, what's the most misconceived notion about quant? I mean, if you can even think of one at all, is there something that people always get wrong about the network?
Yeah, I think that the idea of interoperability when you're in crypto, a lot of people just think about blockchain to blockchain. And I think that's a huge misconception, is that interoperability is limited to crypto. Because honestly, if you look at the market cap for the crypto space, we're currently under $1 trillion market cap. If you look at the global economy, we're talking about, two something quadrillion, or something like that. One and a half or two quadrillion or something like that dollars, meaning that even $1 trillion is less than 1% of the entire global economy. So crypto is a tiny, tiny, tiny piece of what's going on. And in my opinion, and we'll probably talk about this later, but I think like blockchain is kind of just a proof of concept for what, or I should say these crypto projects are kind of a proof of concept for what the financial system will incorporate, like these banks and these larger systems that will come online and start using digital assets as everything in the world gets tokenized. These things will incorporate what we're learning from these like DeFi projects and things of that nature. But this DeFi is not really the end game. And so the misconception is that interoperability and Quant's use case is mostly to connect different blockchains, when really it's to bring together all databases across the world. And so they're really accessing that 99% of value that most of these other interoperability projects can't sniff.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second as well, because there are a few that are native to crypto. And I'll be honest with you, before I was introduced to Quant about a month ago, my field of view was narrow. Again, it was just pretty much crypto related. And coming to see Quant, it's like, holy crap, like there's so much more here. Like, as you said, that's only 1%. We've got 99% in front of us, but we're so focused over here. And I think it's a wow factor, but we'll get into some of those use cases in a minute. Now, I kind of want to steer back a second here and just ask you, you've kind of already answered the question, but how did you actually stumble across Quant? Were you researching one? A few people have asked me this question and just wanted to know how you kind of were first introduced to it. Was it just through research?
Yeah, funny enough, the same guy that I asked about Bitcoin, we had been talking a lot, and through the years at that point, it was 2020, and I was just asking him what his biggest bags were, and his number two bag at the time was QNT, and I just started looking into it, and all the stuff I just mentioned about kind of being able to attack all the legacy infrastructure and the 99%. The more, every time you peel back a layer with Quant, it's like, whoa, whoa, new layer, and it's like there weren't a lot of holes in this one, and it started to put all this other stuff, all these other projects in a way different light, a way smaller light. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I just, someone introduced me to the name, and I just started diving down the rabbit hole.
So was that the moment you went, oh shit, like when you realized that this is a lot more than just crypto? Was that the moment when you were like, I'm going to do a lot more research of Quant?
Yeah, that was definitely it. It's just the use case, and then looking at Gilbert. Obviously, I think that's a big selling point for
Yeah.
a lot of people. Just the way that this guy's navigated his career and what he's been able to build. Uh, his resume, most people have seen it, but if you haven't, just Google Gilbert Verdian LinkedIn or Gilbert Verdian resume. His website will come up. Um, it's pretty impressive stuff. He's worked at Her Majesty's Treasury, the Bank of England, Federal Reserve. He's worked in the Australian government. He won Chief Information Security Officer of the Year at Vocalink, which is a MasterCard company, and a bunch more things. He was director of PricewaterhouseCoopers. Like, he's a beast. So that was a big selling point as well.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. So right now, where's your attention predominantly for as a quant researcher? Like, are you focused on wider adoption, as I said before, poking holes in the ship, or do you want to be kind of like that voice of reason for the community?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think as a creator and researcher, I've found a responsibility to, like you said, kind of have a bit of a balanced voice. I will say, like, as amazing as this community is, there's also a huge tendency to wear rose-colored glasses all the time. And so I like to point out things that, they're not as comfortable. Now, I guess on my Twitter, I will say that I'm way more bullish, and on Telegram, maybe I'm a little more questionable. So my Twitter, I've started to incorporate some more like shit posting a little bit over the last couple months, just having some fun with it, and going for some engagement and just keeping people, having a good time, but also mixing in still the research heavy threads, and things like that. So there's a balance. So I would say, I'm reporting a little bit more now too. Like when today, like Oracle earnings came out, and they're a huge partner of Quant. So, I highlighted some of the biggest key takeaways. I'm always looking at Nexi groups, press releases, and seeing kind of what they're up to. So I'm reporting a little bit at things not just Quant related, but Quant partner related.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to encapsulate everything from like speculative partnerships and going deep down rabbit holes. You know, understanding the technology and explaining it to the best of my ability, talking about their partners, and also having some fun with the entertainment type posts.
You summed it up perfectly. You tweeted maybe a week or two ago that you could spend 40 hours a week on quant research and you'd never get enough time to still look at all the stuff. And that's kind of resonating with me. Like, there's so many partners and so many partners we don't know about that the rabbit hole never pretty much ends. So, um, I kind of want to zoom out a bit again because myself, as I said, doing my research on quant as I normally do, I was kind of like looking at the 1% for so long at crypto, and I just started creeping back at the 99. And for people that aren't as knowledgeable on what that perspective is, how amazing the interoperable sort of aspects are. Could you maybe give people the realistic perspective on kind of like what quant can be doing in the next 10 to 15 years? And I know you've kind of touched on this again, but if you could maybe clarify that for those who are wondering.
Yeah. So we're entering a world of hyper digitization and hyper tokenization. And so, the internet as we know it is kind of just scratching the surface of what this interconnectivity of the world is going to end up being. Um, it's hard to imagine that the internet right now is not the push, right? So we had like Web 1 where it was pretty much a read only internet. Then you have Web 2 where it's an up and back, a read and write. So that's the social media internet. And then you have Web 3 that's coming, which is now like an ownership internet where it's not just sharing the data, but it's also sharing value and owning the data. So uh, that is a huge shift in and of itself, and it will be just as big of a jump as it was from Web 0, no web, to Web 1, and Web 1 to Web 2. From Web 2 to Web 3, maybe the biggest jump of them all. So Quant's opportunity is to kind of capture a lot of the value of the data flow or the value transfer flow across all of these different networks that are siloed off from a digital asset perspective. So, you're talking about the likes of Oracle that has 400,000 clients. They're all going to be, let's say one example would be tokenizing, for rewards programs. And that's all going to encompass NFTs, right? So you think about NFT as like a JPEG, whatever. That's not really what an NFT is. The JPEG picture is a representation of an individual token, right? That you can trade and prove ownership of. So what does that token actually give you access to? Is it some online world? Is it something in real life that you can show up? Is it, what is it in these different digital environments that a unique ownership of something can give to you? So in Starbucks NFT program, they may have a rewards thing where your NFT like has value, and maybe they partner with Epic Games and you can do something in like there's unlimited kind of possibilities for interoperability of digital assets. And Quant is the first mover, and we didn't talk about the standards, but they're really going from a standards first approach, using some of these international standards bodies to really push forward the API gateways and kind of making that happen.
Yeah, could you maybe touch on some of Gilbert's roles in that and in the standards?
Sure. So his biggest one is he created ISO TC 307. So ISO is the International Organization of Standardization, and they basically create standards around things like the size of paper so that printer companies can create, the right hardware, or country codes, and uh, you know, uh, just food safety mechanisms, things that across border internationally there need to be standards for. That's ISO. And Gilbert actually created ISO TC Technical Committee 307, which is the ISO standard for blockchain and DLT, distributed ledger technology. And there's currently, I think 50 something active countries, and then I think like 62 or 63 overall member countries. I mean, every major country you could possibly think of, right? In the Western and the Eastern world is a part of ISO TC307. And there's about, I think, 11 different working groups that are touching on governance, interoperability, um, uh, tokenization, just all these different types of things that touch on this smart contracts, right? And they're putting out slowly but surely work that's been done. Like the governance working group just put out a paper, their final governance standard that they've been working on for 5 years. I mean, Gilbert created this in 2016, so this isn't some new thing. Like he founded the whole thing, and he's currently the sitting, I guess it's called the chairman. I think there's a different word for it, but he's the leader of the interoperability working group, which I believe is working group 7,
Yeah.
as well as one other working group. So he's playing a major role in that. He's also the chairman of INATBA, which is I can't remember what it stands for, but it's an international blockchain association out of Europe, standards body. And one of the things about the standards is that there's a lot of different standards bodies now, and so there's going to need to be almost like a standard of standards. I think kind of ISO might play a role there. But one other thing that they're doing, and this is a whole other rabbit hole, but they're working on something called the Secure Asset Transfer Protocol, which is going through the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force. And the IETF created TCP/IP, and they look over HTTPS and BGP and some of these other major protocols that run the internet. And they're in the process of working with the IETF to kind of create API gateway standards that if the IETF adopts that and standardizes it, it's pretty much a lock that everyone in the world is going to use it. So Quant would fall underneath the SATP protocol. It would be like an expression of that. But again, they're just on the forefront of kind of where this is going.
So in terms of what you've just spoken about, does Quant have any like direct competitors? You said that, Quant is at the forefront of all this and it was the first mover, but is anyone creeping up? I've heard someone mention to me the Morpheus. Is that how you say it? We've got Polkadot, Cosmos. They're more so the 1%. They're more so crypto related, but any other competitors in that aspect?
I'm not too familiar with Morpheus. I have heard of it, but I don't really know how it works. Yeah, like you said, there's a bunch of players that are either crypto focused, or they're just bigger walled gardens, is essentially how I think of it. So you can create like a crypto network or an even network of different databases, but they all need to either like use your programming language, or they need to like use your consensus mechanism, something of that nature that ties them together via like technical restrictions,
Yeah.
where Quant actually allows for any to any. So Quant Overledger is a layer 2 basically. It sits above all the different blockchains and databases, such that these things can it just lets them speak to each other versus connecting this one to this one. Or having like even a central hub that everyone can connect to. It's not really like that. It's kind of just like it's an ordering and filtering layer for transactions across different networks. So nobody's really doing it the way that they're doing it, and nobody's doing it through the standards bodies, and no one's doing it with APIs. And if you read kind of the literature that's coming out of the Bank for International Settlements and a lot of these other major financial bodies that are pushing forward digital assets and how they're going to be established in the future, you see that they're going the same direction as Quant with the APIs and the gateway approach. So until I see somebody that's doing anything close to that from a standards perspective, from an API perspective, and also just a regulatory perspective in general, I can't really see. And I guess there's one other thing is kind of like Quant connects, like we talked about, blockchain and DLT back to legacy infrastructure. And so to have that enterprise and legacy interoperation is really something that not a lot of people are doing as well. So the combination of all those things is they're pretty much set up in a place where no one's really competing with them overall. There are competitors on different aspects of their interoperability, You're also going to have legacy players like Swift and Fiserv that are doing kind of, cross-border payments and bank to bank and things like that Quant is definitely tackling. So they'll have competitors in a way in different aspects of what they do. But if those networks and companies that are competing on the niche use cases, I say niche, they're obviously like $1 trillion use cases, but it's not the whole pie. They're still going to want to connect to the other niche use cases and the other networks and the other databases and the other walled gardens, right? And that's where Overledger comes into play.
It's the network of networks. That's the sort of slogan. Yeah. So what about could you possibly list about 3 or so industries that Quant is predominantly aimed to sort of disrupt, and possibly just walk us through one use case for one of those industries?
Sure. So, obviously the biggest one is finance. So I'll leave that one on the side because that's obvious. They're working with tons of banks, and they're doing tokenization and CBDCs and stable coins and things like that. Outside of finance, they're doing a lot of work in the telecommunications space. So this is basically, like your ISPs, your Verizons, your AT&Ts, things like that. I'm not saying they're partnered with them, but what I am saying is they're the ones that provide kind of data flow, voice, text, data, images, sound, video, those providers that allow those to flow over the internet. Interoperability is going to be key there once digital assets come into play. And Quant, that's probably their number 3 thing. Finance number 1, telecom number 3. I'm saving number 2 for a second. And then another one would be the metaverse. I think that, when you look at, even though we're probably 10 years off from that being a daily interaction for us to put on some headsets and experience a different world in a way that's meaningful to our lives, that's coming. And we're going to need to, more than ever in those environments, be able to move and share assets across different worlds, across different networks, across different applications, and carry our avatars from here to here and be who we are in every environment. So interoperability is going to be huge there, and I think Quant will play a part in that. And then the number 2 that I was alluding to that I'll give an example on would be healthcare. And this is, the healthcare data is one of the biggest industries in the world. Healthcare is an $8 trillion industry. And, one example would be through Quant's partnership with Oracle. Oracle just purchased Cerner, who is an electronic health records company that they purchased them for, it was either 26 or $36 billion earlier this year. It finalized. And Cerner has this thing called the Seamless Exchange, and they're working with other standards bodies in healthcare interoperability, where essentially they're creating a network that, I can, say something happens to me and I'm out of town and I got to go to like some out of network specialist or hospital, and they take care of me. I go back home. My home doctor can simply just log on to a network, see everything. Everything's verified. They're what they're calling longitudinal records. And so it's trusted records across different locations, different visits. Medications are going to be all in there, and what I've taken and who's applied it or who's given it to me, and just in and out of network, everything you could think of to do with having healthcare data around the individual and being able to process that in different facilities around the world with no friction. And that's not quite yet on the blockchain, but that will be on the blockchain. And if you read about it, they're definitely going that direction. So I think that's an incredibly huge opportunity, and it's one that Quant's taking very seriously.
And Gilbert has background in the health industry. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, he even invented Overledger. I guess the base version of Overledger he invented while he was working at the New South Wales government in the health department. And he essentially created a system that could share data across networks. That's when ISO approached him and said, hey, can we make this a standard? And that's how
Right.
ISO TC307 was born, was through Gilbert's work as a member of the health department. And so healthcare records, to your point, have always been a big part of Overledger's history.
Wow, that's incredible. I didn't realize that. Yeah. Well, in that sense, is there is there a certain section of quant that you think is the most undervalued? And in saying that, is there maybe an overappreciated aspect of Overledger? Is there one on each side of the spectrum, do you think?
Yeah, I think for underappreciated is something that I've been thinking more about is kind of these like second generation or second level effects of the QNT token. So a lot of people think about, okay, interoperability, all these networks need to connect, everything we've been talking about, and that the QNT token is going to, be used to process not just licensing fees to access the network, but also taking a cut essentially of every transaction that happens on the network. And so, wow, my QNT is going to go up in value because there's a limited amount and it's going to have heavy demand. Um, I think that's level one. I think there's a level two value to the token that is, I could theorize here and I will in a moment, but we don't really know where it's going to go. But what I'm thinking is that once once the network is fully established, and by that I mean that the community will be able to run gateways or essentially nodes on the network and process transactions independently. Currently, it's just enterprises and governments and Quant Network themselves that are processing the network. They haven't opened it up to the community just yet, which of course is what everybody's been waiting for. I think that will probably happen in the next 24 months, is what I'm hoping. Um, and you know, I think what that does is not only does it create, a little bit of passive income, maybe you get a percentage or two of real yield by being able to process these transactions on the network and getting that return, that rewards. But also, I think that like secondary marketplaces and business opportunities emerge using the technology. So, independent developers or companies might come in and start building really interesting programs. Because if you think about like the biggest breakthroughs on Web 2, it's like, it's not governments and large enterprises that are creating these like incredibly innovative things. It's Mark Zuckerberg in his room at Harvard. You know what I mean? It's Evan Spiegel creating Snapchat. It's Jack Dorsey and others creating Twitter. Like it's Elon Musk and others creating PayPal. It's not, HSBC and JP Morgan. They're not the ones. So they're the ones that are creating right now on Overledger, these big enterprises. But once you open it up to the community, you start to have, a lot more flexibility and a lot more freedom, and thus a lot more innovation from, the brilliance that is being locked up and not allowed to interact with these multi-ledger contracts and this incredible software. And so then all of a sudden the QNT token might be really useful in some of these new marketplaces and these new applications that start to emerge. And so I've just been thinking about like, if I have a big bag of that, yes, it will get me kind of, a bigger gateway to process more transactions, but also maybe I can use those to facilitate value in certain new ecosystems, or I can be an investor, in a Overledger or a quant based, startup or something like that. That'll have like these secondary effects. So that's kind of an underappreciated thing, I think. And
Yep.
then as far as overappreciated, like I said kind of earlier, I think that there's a thing in the community where like basically anytime the word interoperability comes up in any facet anywhere, it's like, oh, Quant's probably involved. And it's like, I think, and I'm been guilty of this myself, is kind of just overreaching a little bit as to, how deep they are already. I think that they have they've made a big impact in terms of adoption, but I don't think they're anywhere near, 70 or 80% of like all companies moving into blockchain and stuff. Like, I don't think we're there. So
Yep.
I would just say be careful online and kind of reading everybody's speculation. A lot of people post speculation as fact, and that's something that I'm trying to be a lot more careful about myself.
Yeah, I really like what you said about the secondary sort of network effects kind of. I think that's kind of something we haven't seen thus far, really, have we? We haven't really seen an area where you have these brilliant minds creating these amazing sort of whatever they may be, social media, for example, these network effects machines. But then if you can use that to seamlessly interact with, X amount of other sort of similar applications, I mean, the use cases are going to be incredible. It's just going to be an amazing amount of value created from that. So, definitely, like, what's your opinion about sort of speaking of network effects? Like, what is the strongest fundamental that you can observe in quant, such as network effects, defensibility, like in any patents, partnerships, the team? What is the strongest aspect of quant aside from the technology?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of two of what you just said, which is the network effects and partnerships. I think they kind of play off of each other because, and I have a thread on this if you want to check it out, but it's about Quant's partnership strategy. And what they've done is they don't just go out and partner with individual banks, let's say, or individual healthcare companies, or anything like that, or even individual countries in some cases. What they do is they go to the enterprises that already have all of those companies and all those countries that are using, and central banks that are using those networks, and they partner with them. So for example, like I mentioned Oracle a few times already, they have 430,000 clients that are like Starbucks and Verizon and Boeing and JP Morgan, and so they're already in the bucket. So once Oracle is now like, oh, Overledger's been certified, so anytime anybody in our network wants to start using blockchain and tokenizing and NFTs, and they want to do so in a meaningful way, they can go cross chain, has enterprise grade security, all the things that these companies are going to look for. They just go, oh yeah, you're already using, Oracle cloud infrastructure. We already have built into the Oracle blockchain platform. Overledger's already built in. Whether or not they even explicitly tell them it's Overledger, depending on how deep they probably want to look into it, but it doesn't matter because it's running using Overledger and thus the QNT token. Another example is Nexi Group. So this is a combination of a few different entities, one of which is SIA, which Quant partnered with in 2019 and then was certified by them in 2020. At the time, SIA had about 580 banks, including a couple dozen central banks attached to their network. They're like the SWIFT of Europe. They also have banks in Africa and East, in the East and Asia and things of that nature. And so again, partnering with SIA that has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of banks, they've since been merged with Nexi Group, so now it's over 1,000 financial institutions across basically everywhere, but I think like North America and South America, like everything in Europe and the East and Africa. And so Quant's partner with them. So it's like when everything starts to move into digital assets again, it's like the solution's already in place. And then furthermore, they're partnered with LACchain, which is the Latin American and Caribbean chain, which they have, I think it's 15 to 18 different countries that are now plugged in there across mostly South America, also Spain, and the US is also one of them. And they have remittance corridors between countries, and they're going to be using it. It's a public permission network. So what that means is that you have public services like the public roads and public health. They're public services that anyone can use, but you need to show ID and show who you are to use them. That's public and permissioned at the same time, right? And so that's going to be a blockchain network. It's a regional network across jurisdictions that's providing public services via the blockchain. So we're talking about business to business payments, welfare, if they have like UBI programs, even peer to peer. There's a ton of different use cases for this, and it's cross border, as well as creating the Latin American dollar, the actual official Latin American dollar, which comes out in 2023, which will be built on Overledger, and that will have 12 of those countries initially as a part of it. So again, Quant partnering with LACchain, instead of going to each country and trying to, like, I know Bitcoin's not a company, so it's not a great comparison, but like you see, they're going to like El Salvador and they're like working on the ground. It's like Quant just went to a multi-country alliance, right? And are building that way. So the network effects that will take place as a result of this partnership strategy is, I think, one of the most powerful things possible in any network. And so I love to see that
Yeah.
from Quant.
Yeah, what amazed me, and I've actually got this from your thread, and I'll have it in the description, of course, is that as you just pretty much said, they're targeting basically the infrastructure that's making this new, that's, as you said, digitizing, this new world, this new digital token economy. Everything is going to be running online very, very soon, maybe 10, 15 years, but that's relatively soon. And yeah, Quant is literally targeting the infrastructure to make everything sort of happen, which is just, obviously the amount of value and network effects from that's incredible. Um, we've kind of touched on CBDCs there. I want to get your opinion, Greg, on irrespective of Quant, what is your honest opinion of CBDCs?
Yeah, it's a good question. They're scary. They're scary. I mean, I am not someone who is a huge proponent of trusting the government, let's say. I don't give them the benefit of the doubt very often. And, CBDCs is potentially another avenue of power and control that can be implemented. There's a lot of use cases that, people throw out there in terms of, social credit systems and
Mm.
being able to deduct automatically from your wallet. If there is some sort of universal basic income set up, you're going to get that in CBDCs that may or may not expire in 30 days if you don't use them. Or the money may only be able to be used on certain groceries because you've already allotted your certain amount of meat for the month or whatever it's going to be. And so I'm not as worried about like, oh, they can see what I'm buying. It's more like the money is programmable and
Yeah.
it's controlled by the government essentially. So yeah, it's a slippery slope, man. And I don't know where it's going to go, but it's looking like it's going that way. There's over 90% of central banks that are exploring this right now. And I think within the next 5 years, pretty much all of them will have launched.
Okay. Yeah. I've I have pretty much the exact same opinion as you. So I won't kind of elaborate on that. But I'm not trying to pigeonhole you here at all. But in terms of Quant and their CBDC sort of outlook, um, how does Quant sort of like leverage CBDCs or vice versa? And are we kind of using Quant in a way because we believe this idea of what CBDCs could become? Are we more so using it to like front run the what's going to sort of be implemented in the future?
Yeah, I mean, look, we talked about some of the other use cases as well. So I don't think that quant is just about CBDCs. I do think that that is a real use case for it. And they have this technology called multi-ledger token, MLT technology. And this is essentially, we haven't gone really into the specifics about the multi-ledger contracts, but you can basically build uh, one thing is that you can build smart contracts that go across network, right? And they settle on different networks in one smart contract. But then there's something else. They have the multi-ledger tokens, the MLTs, which essentially are tokens that can live on any blockchain at the same time. So you mint them on one network, you apply the quant technology to it, and then it can kind of disperse across all the other networks. And if I spend it over here, it gets deducted over here and over here and over here. And so it lives across networks at the same time. And so this is a really good option for CBDCs. Now,
Mm.
I do believe, over the last like 6 months, I've been less bullish actually on Quant's ability to land uh, central banks to actually mint their CBDCs using Overledger. I used to think that that was going to be a real strong thing because MIT put out a paper with Quant in November 2021 titled Implementing a CBDC. And they basically laid out here are the challenges of CBDCs, here's what needs to be done, and here's why Overledger's multi-ledger token technology is the best there is. And at the same time, MIT was getting commissioned to look at CBDC development for the Federal Reserve, for the Canadian Central Bank, and for the Bank of England. So I was like, oh, okay, they are probably going to end up doing all this stuff. But the more I think about it, the more I'm not so sure about that. I think that the central banks will probably want to build their own like private blockchains, or it also is likely that they won't be on blockchains at all, but they'll be on some form of distributed ledger that can work offline. And I just think they're going to want more control than to like use another company's technology.
Yeah.
However, I do think that in order for CBDCs to be able to speak to all the other applications that are going to be built outside of a CBDC network, I do think that Overledger will be used. So I could be off here, and I reserve the right to kind of change this because I'm always changing my opinion about this stuff because really I don't know shit. I just kind of like try and figure it out as I go. But I'm starting to feel like less CBDCs are going to be like tokens that Overledger's created, and more that it will fulfill its role as an interoperability solution for digital assets as everything else is. And so as these CBDCs want to disperse into the larger digital ecosystem, Overledger will be used at some point in that process to kind of facilitate that transfer.
Yeah, that's okay. So it's not being built as a map on Quant. You believe it's going to be their own network sort of thing, and Quant's just going to be the web that
You know, that
brings it
they
all
may
in.
get a couple of banks to do that. They are part of the Digital Pound Foundation. Nexi Group is now being asked to build certain aspects of the digital euro. They are building the Latin American dollar. That is confirmed. I suppose that is a form of CBDC, even though it's not really CBDC because the central bank's not putting it out per se, but it is kind of like a government-driven utility token.
Yep.
So there will probably be some examples, but I used to think that it would be like 50 to 80% of these things will end up on Overledger.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking like much, much less than that.
Okay. And I've got a question now in regards to the token or the smart contract on Ethereum. Um, we've discussed in a previous call the kind of like the supply difference between there. It's a discovery that you've found and you've brought to my attention. I know you want to reserve this for your own thread, but could you possibly touch a little bit on about what you've found?
Yeah, so I forget actually how I kind of came across it, but I was looking up some stuff. I downloaded all the wallets on Etherscan for the QNT token, and there's actually more QNT in circulation than has been reported. So not much more. It doesn't really change much, but it is an interesting fact. So the number that we all go by right now is 14,612,000 and something. And I think it's actually 14,889,000, something like that. It's in the 880s, right? So it's about 270,000 additional tokens that are unaccounted for in the total supply that's listed on CoinGecko, CoinMarketCap, and that has come out of Quant's own official channels, which not all of them are still active, but some of the old articles that they put up had that number. There's some chats, I dug back in the Telegram to see what I could learn, and there's some chats with Gilbert and the community about what happened with the initial token burn, and I have some theories on what happened. But I think that the blockchain doesn't lie. Like I'm looking at actual wallets that have there's more QNT moving in wallets right now than 14.6 million. So again, I don't think 14.88 million or whatever, I don't think that changes the investment thesis, not even a bit, but
Yeah.
it is good to have the right number. And I'd like to
Yeah.
get to the bottom of that.
I appreciate you sharing that here. In your opinion, if you want to even answer this question now, who do you think has custody of those tokens? If you were to be a guessing man, betting man.
I don't think that any one person has it. Like, because I don't think it was intentional.
Yeah.
Just based on how things went down, I think um, it was a bit. There were some emotions flying actually, and it was a bit of quick math done, and I think there was a mistake made. I just think that those are now floating around in the environment. There's no one wallet that has it. Could it be broken up into separate wallets? Of course. I have no theories really. I just think that I'm just pretty sure that there's a bunch of extra tokens that we
Yeah.
don't know about.
As you said, I mean that's 200K tokens when you're considering the total supply. It's not incredibly. It's not going to change anyone's investment thesis really, unless it's in the hands of an investor who wants to sell. But that's probably not the case at all. So,
Yeah,
um,
it's not something that is like, oh my God, the supply's double, like, and now my thesis around holding these tokens, the network is not the supply is not as low, and it's not like that. It's more just like, uh, you know, it's about I think like 1.5%. So it's
yeah.
like it's not nothing. So just something to consider.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Greg. Now, look. Time for some fun. We've got some community questions here. Now, I just want to make everyone aware that Greg has answered throughout the video some of your questions, and I'm sorry if I couldn't get to your specific question, but we've got about 4 or 5 people here. So the first one is from a friend of mine, Richie Me. Richie asks, when I had a look at Etherscan, it says that Quant has 21% of the tokens, and that is not including the team's tokens. I do think it's a strong project, so I'd like to know a bit more about the allocation, so potentially the burn he's talking about.
Yeah, so I don't think those numbers are correct. You are probably including the burn wallet. So if you look at the holders on Etherscan for the QNT token, you'll see the number one wallet has about 9.5 million tokens in it. And if you, I'm not sure where you're getting 21 because that's obviously like, I'm not sure how you're coming to 21 million or 21%. However, the founders currently hold about 1.2 million tokens, which is approximately 8% of the supply. That none of that has ever moved. They did move it to a separate wallet, but it was just like one lump sum of like, this is where it was since the inception, and they moved it to a new wallet, but it's still, the 1.2. And then there's also an advisor's wallet that has about 4% of supply. That has never moved. That's about 600,000 tokens. And then the company operations wallet, I don't know what it started at, but it's all the way down. Those are the tokens they've been selling over time to kind of fund the company. And that's down to around 60 or 65,000 tokens, excuse me, which is less than 0.5% of the supply. So that in total is less than 13% between all the different entities. And remember, like the founders are made up of multiple people, the advisors are made up of multiple people. And so, again, I'm not sure where you're getting the 21% from, but the team currently holds less than 1% for company operations, and then about 12% across all the different founders and advisors.
Okay, awesome. Next question we have from Jay Falcon. So he actually has a couple of questions here. The first one is, why hasn't the price jumped even with all these partnerships?
Yeah, so it's a good question. And my opinion is that we're still early. We're still laying the groundwork. So the partnerships that they've made are getting out in front of kind of this wave, right? So like I mentioned, kind of this way that they partner with these large networks. And the members of those networks are not necessarily using blockchain and tokenization yet. We're just not there. Things are starting to click a little bit, like the NFT move in 2021. That's when enterprises start to be like, oh, we could do something with blockchain. Of course, there were some already doing some supply chain tracking and things like that. But really, like a real retail use case that they saw a bottom line and a way to drive revenue, NFTs started to get the gears going. So we're only about a year and a half into that. Once all of those things come online, I mean, you're also talking about like digital securities. So like the stock market essentially going onto tokenization. These things are going to take, in my opinion, another 3 to 5 years. So Quant is making the partnerships at the right time before everybody has moved into the space. So the partnerships are exciting because they're at the ground level and they're now the infrastructure, and they're waiting for everyone to just come on. And it's not going to be a flick of a switch, but it is going to be a snowball, and it is going to be slowly and then all at once, right? It's going to be that hockey stick. And so, I just look at it as a time to accumulate and to do more research. The partnerships are extremely exciting, but not everything is online yet. And so you're not going to see the price go, to the moon when everything else in the economy is suffering because the utility is still minimal. Having said that, we do see some very interesting price action with Quant as compared to other tokens with regards to sometimes just like going 15% in a day out of nowhere. It's been very strange. Even before the bull run in 2021, like everything was going to the moon and Quant was just sitting at $40. It was a joke in the community of like a $40 stable coin for about 3 months. It was the time when Binance, anyone could list anything on BSC, and it was just, they did this dog and that dog, and it was going 100x literally in like a week or even 10x overnight. And Quant was not moving, and it had the best fundamentals in the space. And I was like, what the hell is going on? and then it kind of went to the moon after everything crashed in May 2021 when Tesla said they were selling, and the Chinese banned mining of Bitcoin, and everything crashed down from 65 down to like 20 or whatever it was, or 30. And Quant went from 40 to 400. So it was like it's doing a little bit different. Of course, it is correlated to the market in some respect, but also it's had some very odd price action. And I do wonder if that has to do with the license buying, and the team kind of like converts client funds into QNT tokens in batches. And so that utility will eventually drive the market more and more for the token.
Yeah, it's really primed to be able to step away from the sentiment of the market, or probably be one of the first to actually do that. And as you've pretty much said there, it already almost has. As you said, like the licenses and stuff like that operate a little bit differently. So it pretty much Quant's leveraging crypto or a smart contract on Ethereum to make the payments. So really, it's got no value connected to crypto other than people see what's happening in crypto and go, "This is bad. I'm going to exit." So yeah, I guess it's probably one of the only projects that can actually say that it can, unattach itself from the market the fastest. So I think Jay has a second question for you here. Is there any method to confirm that partners are buying QNT?
Not really. We don't have the visibility on that type of thing. I would say that is one of the things about this project, that if you need to see everything transparently, as if it is some sort of blockchain DeFi project with you know uh, kind of open source code, and everything is visible and all the partners and all the business logic, you're not going to get that with this one. That's just the nature of the game. Not yet, anyway. Maybe when regulations come through and things change, things need to be opened up a little bit more. But I wouldn't bank on it. I think that most of what we go by here is kind of watching Gilbert's words to actions over the course of the last 6 years, and kind of what he's done with the project, and then and kind of everything unfolding exactly as he said it would, with the way that exchanges are blowing up, with the way that regulations are coming into play, with the way that DeFi is kind of a bit more of a side game. And uh, you see him sitting on panels with some of the biggest central bankers in the world, and he's kind of leading these conversations in some ways, and people look to him as a real thought leader. And so then you see the big partnerships come out that we've already talked about. And so that's what we go on, and we just look at the math. It's just if this, then that. Like if this amount of money comes in, the QNT token will rise. Unfortunately, don't have 100% visibility on everything.
Yeah, yeah. Now we got a few more questions here. So this one's from No Logo Crypto. He asks, having all these bullish partners such as Oracle, UST, Lightchain, etc., and yet the price is still at $100 or so, why is the price not increasing if in fact these partners are using Overledger? And if they are using Overledger, are you concerned that even this level of partnerships is not enough to decouple QNT from the overall market itself? So pretty much what we've kind of said.
It's kind of the same answer. I think just to extend it a little bit more would be, again, it's the time frame. It is back to that, like we're building the infrastructure, but the players aren't really here yet. We're at the party, we're pre-gaming, we're waiting for everybody to show up. Eventually they're going to come, and we're going to be the hosts at the party, and we're going to be having a great time, and we're going to be kind of one of the great players there. So this is a game of patience. You're here early. If you're going for the get rich quick stuff, this is probably not the one. But again, we're also at the point in the market where that may not come again. We may not get, just those overnight sensations on bullshit, because there is regulatory infrastructure coming into place across different countries. So yeah, they treat this like a real investment. The way I like to think about it is, I'm 35 years old. I'm going to be on the planet for another 60 years. I can wait 3 to 5 to 7 years to change the rest of my life.
Yeah. It's a good way of looking at it. I've got a really, really interesting question here for you. So Lambo, I think it's Lambo Saw Food Stamps, asks, a lot of us work at IT companies and may be in positions to say, hey, have you heard of QNT? but I'm not saying anything unless I know for sure. What are some things that if we see our company doing, we can speak up to?
If he sees his own company doing.
Yeah, that's right. Or anyone that's in a sort of a position where they can sort of say, "Hey, check out Quant." Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, well, I think if you work in like a multinational conglomerate, like if you have organization that has offices in 60 countries and things like that, there's a great article that Gilbert wrote about commercial stable coins, kind of being able to do settlements across different units within companies. I think that saves a lot of time and money, and from an accounting standpoint. Um, Obviously, if you have any sort of rewards based infrastructure, that can all be tokenized and can really, be taken to the next level. Now, again, if you're part of big companies at the same time, they're a little slower to move and they're more risk averse. So for you to come in and say, hey, like, there's interoperable digital assets, and they're like, what the hell are you talking about, right? All I know is FTX just blew up. I'm not touching any of that shit. Like
yeah,
that's where their head is probably at. So um, if you really want to do that for your company, I mean, look, here's one thing that I think is smart would be to like potentially put something together that, is a written presentation, get someone that will give you the time of day, that'll give you 20 minutes, 30 minutes, make your case for potential opportunities. I know this is not going to happen probably in the next 12 to 24 months, but you should probably bring this to leadership, or if it is leadership, like you might want to talk about this with other people. I'm happy to come and talk about it, because what that does is, even if they don't implement it, if you call it correctly and then 3 or 4 or 5 years later they realize that you made it right, you just have, you just look great. Like you just have,
yeah.
I wouldn't say it's leverage, but it's just better to call your shot if you believe in it now. There's still, so again, it's going to be hard probably to get them to implement stuff right away because we're still early, but there's nothing wrong with, calling your shot. And even if they think you're crazy, I think just just taking that step to kind of, I can't think of the word, but like, putting yourself out there really just, and putting together something organized will really show a lot.
Yeah, I guess having the balls to be like, "Hey, I'm going to take charge. This is what I think is a good idea, or is looking like a good idea." Yeah. We got last one here from Joe Camel. So Joe asks, additionally, this is a really good question as well. What events is he looking at over the next 24 months as adoption catalysts?
Oh yeah. Well, I think Latin American dollar next year is certainly interesting to me. Um, I think 24 months is an interesting time frame, because I'm of the opinion that we could see like an extended bear market. Um, I'm not like calling my shot or anything, but I'm definitely like mentally preparing myself for, a rough few years. So I'm not sure like really what's going to pop up over the next couple years. I really think the mass adoption is in the back half of the decade. That's what I've been saying for a while, and I'm sticking to that, of digital assets overall. Again, whether it's digitizing securities, dealing with CBDCs, metaverse even further out. So this is going to take a little while. The next 2 years, yeah, I think just looking at maybe more so what Quant's partners are doing, like seeing who Oracle's onboarding, seeing what Nexi's doing, what LackChain's doing. They now have a new partnership with UST, which is a consulting company that essentially helps companies digitize and move into this new world. And they have, I think, 140 of the global 100 use their consulting services. Now they're not, it's not as expansive of a partnership. They, I think, are just for now doing a sandbox for CBDCs, for some tokenization for companies in kind of like a private environment. But that can expand very quickly if things go well. So I'm just kind of like watching the space. Look, I'm enjoying the ride. That's what I'm excited for
Yeah.
the next 24 months, is kind of like just diving in and just learning and you know accumulating. I mean, that's all I can really say. I don't have something in my back pocket that people are going to promise. I guess community gateways. Maybe in the second year of that, in 2024, maybe is kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe they might introduce gateways, so that could be fun.
As you said, it's more of a long-term play, isn't it? So I guess 24 months might be a bit constricting there, but I guess that's kind of like leading towards the next bull market.
You
So
know what's
that's
crazy, man, is all of these things are long-term plays, but people just
yeah,
don't want to admit it to themselves because they've seen the runs. They've seen those like 2, 3, 4 month spurts where people go crazy and they just make insane gains. And it's like that's not the realistic scenario for everybody, for most
yeah,
people. And as we move forward and the market matures more, it's less and less likely that you will ever experience that without holding something for a long time and capturing those few months of godsend when you had 3 months to wait. So everything that you're investing in this space is a long-term investment, and if you're not experiencing that and you're not taking that approach, then I think you're doing it at your own demise.
yeah. Like we're accustomed to the fact that we are very, very early, and I think people forget that when you're early, it means you have to wait longer because it's got to go through proof of concept first, and then it's got to get established. Regulation needs to come into it, and then it's got to go mainstream. And it's like this doesn't happen within 5, 10, sometimes even 15 years. It takes a long time for adoption to happen. So, hey, completely agree with you there. Um, Now, while I've got you, is there anything else you want to mention, Greg? Anything you'd like to say or shout out or anything at all?
No, I mean, I'm on Twitter at Greg Lunt 27. That's really where I put out most of my content. Um, I really love the space. I'm really grateful for everything the project has given me in terms of an audience, in terms of a job awareness, and also kind of, I guess, piggybacking on what we are just talking about with kind of this long-term approach. I'm able to like just not stress over the price on a day-to-day basis because I have a bigger vision, and I've learned so much about so many things that I never would have learned about in terms of how money works, how
Yeah,
interoperability and TCP/IP and standards bodies and just like all these things that probably bored me to death 2 years ago, and now it's like giving me life. And so I urge everybody to kind of figure out what about this future of money is exciting to you, and to give it all of your attention if that's something that you're interested in. And if you're not and you're just here for gains, then you just have to be calculated and realistic about your timelines.
yeah. And you got to look at different projects at that point too. You can't look at a project like Quant and have the intention to go after a quick 10x if you consider quick, a month or two. So, um, yeah, it's all just about perspective, I think. Look, Greg, I really want to thank you for your time. I know you're a busy man, and I appreciate you answering all those questions for me and the community. And again, guys, go check Greg out on Twitter. So, with that being said, thanks again, mate, and we'll talk to everyone soon. Bye.